think that HR has more emotional demands put upon it than any other department in most companies. And given that it's a considerable part of the job, how do we get more emotionally savvy? That discussion's coming up now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on the show we talk about anything related to HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my awesome guests. Today, my guest is Dina Denham Smith. Dina is an executive coach who works with senior leaders at companies like Adobe, Netflix, and Google. She's written many Harvard Business Review articles, and she's the lead author of a book called Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. Hello, Dina. How are you?
Hello. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. I have so many questions. As I was saying just before we hit record, I might not be able to ask them all, but we'll give it a shot. So diving right in, you talk about emotional savvy. What is it? And if you break it down into its parts, what are the parts?
How I think about emotional savvy is having a scientifically accurate understanding of what emotions are, and then being able to recognize, explore, and strategically use emotional data is akin to emotional intelligence. But honestly, I think we're sort of missing the boat. We have been talking about emotional intelligence for 20 or 30 years, and programs abound to teach leaders how to be more emotionally intelligent, but they skip too far ahead, and they'll teach leaders how to display empathy or manage conflict. But real emotional savvy it's far more elemental than that. It needs to start with respect for emotional data, and then the ability to really understand it and use it for personal and organizational benefit. And so I'm not trying to coin some new thing, but when I think about emotional savvy, it is more elemental, because that is the foundation of true emotional intelligence. It's not learning how to script, it's not scripted actions. It's truly understanding and using emotional data.
So you say emotional savvy is more elemental than emotional intelligence. Like, how does applying emotional savvy look different than applying emotional intelligence?
I feel like we talk about emotional intelligence just as this very important, broad, personal capacity, but then we don't equip people with the real understanding and the real skills to build it.
Okay.
And so in the book and in my articles, what I'm trying to do is really offer that more accurate understanding of what they are, offer reframes, help leaders see that emotions are not this sort of amorphous, sort of, seemingly risky place to go with their team, but actual information and data that's critical to personal performance, team performance, personal health, organizational health. Emotions are one of the most undervalued and underused assets available to leaders and organizations. And that doesn't get captured when we just talk about the importance of emotional intelligence.
Damn, yes. Yes. So it's hard for me to pick what question I'm going to ask next, but let's go with, what's one misconception around emotions you wish would just go away?
Well, there's about 10. But if I had to just choose one, it would probably be that they interfere with good business and decision making. Because that's sort of umbrella-like
Yeah.
in its scope. And at the end of the day, emotions do not interfere with good business or good decision making. Emotions are information; they're data. And when we as individuals or as leaders tap into that data, we can have healthier relationships. We can navigate our careers more successfully. We unlock higher team cohesion, higher team performance. We individually and collectively make better decisions, are more creative, and it flows
Mm-hmm.
straight to the bottom line in
Mm-hmm.
terms of retention. Um, and so feeling as though emotions are not appropriate in the workplace to me seems downright silly, because any time and any place you have humans, you're going to have emotions. And so you can either choose to acknowledge the emotions that are inherent to human beings, or you
Mm-hmm.
can ignore them at your peril. Because when you ignore emotions, they don't go away. They're still there. And
Yes.
unacknowledged emotions ultimately just get in the way of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. So are the norms around emotions changing? From what you've said, I think it's still not okay for most workplaces to cry at work.
I think the norms are slowly changing. Um, I actually think if there's one good thing that came out of COVID, it was just this more complex understanding of people and some of the humanity that was displayed. But the norms are definitely not changing quickly enough. And to that exact question, I would say that um, the ability to cry at work depends on who you are. Some people can cry with less penalty than others. And so, for instance, if you are a man um, with power in an organization and you tear up, you maybe shed a few, you might be described as compassionate, really in touch with your feelings, and it's that's seen as a good thing. If
Mhm,
you are a woman or a person of color and you do the same, the perception of it is different. If you're a woman, you might be seen as too emotional.
mhm,
And so emotions in organizations are, and what is okay to display and in what quantities and by whom it's gendered. And it also has to do with how much organizational power you have. So it's a complex
that's
situation.
that is very complex. So it is still for most of us, it is still risky, to cry at work. So we're trying to change norms, inviting more emotion at work, but it has to be productive. We have all seen situations where people let their emotions run away with them, and it is not productive. It's not helpful.
Right.
So, what is the right way to be managing emotions at work? Like, how are we? Are we? We I think we're supposed to be developing emotional maturity.
Well, gosh, when I talk about the importance of emotions at work, I'm not suggesting that we should just all let it hang out, right?
Right.
That if you're upset, kind of raging is okay.
Yeah.
That is not what I'm saying at all.
Hmm.
We all must manage our emotions appropriately.
Hmm.
What oftentimes can happen at work, and where some of the cost lies, is there's a lot of faking and suppressing of
Mm.
emotions at work. And over time, that has real costs. And so, yeah, we all need to manage our emotions and show up appropriately.
Mhm,
It's just that there is, we have some historical notions of what being professional looks
mm,
like and means, and
mhm,
and that archetype was really, it comes from like the 1920s, 1930s um, vision of professionals, and
mhm,
those were largely white men at the time,
mhm,
white collar
mhm,
professionals, and so it's a little bit constrained.
mhm. Yeah. And a related idea that I just have to ask about is this idea of authenticity.
Yeah.
Authenticity got a whole bunch of momentum in that we should show up and be our authentic selves, but I don't think we ever really unpacked what that meant. I don't think we meant, well, I don't think most people meant that you should show up and have no check on your emotional expression because that's authentic. How does this idea of authenticity and managing your emotions and emotional savvy, how does that all link together?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, right? Because there were so many years where organizations would broadcast, like, bring your whole selves to work,
Yes,
right?
yes. Oh,
I was like, don't do that. I'm like,
yeah, don't do that.
don't
But
do that.
also do that.
They don't real that's not really what they mean. Um, and so authenticity is complicated, especially for leaders, because um, there's this broad desire and expectation for leaders to be authentic, um,
Mhm.
and show their humanity. But at
Mhm.
the same time, if leaders are too authentic or show, too much emotion, they really risk their credibility.
Mhm.
And so this is something that I refer to as the authenticity paradox. And
Oh.
there's just a tightrope that leaders especially need to walk when it comes to this sort of being authentic. Um,
Mhm.
and the longer that you've been somewhere and the better that you know people and the more power that you have, again, the more leeway you have for being authentic. But if you are new to a company, if you, um, and depending on the situation, being careful about kind of what you say and what you display. It is wise, but it does take emotional work. When we're like,
Mm.
how should I be showing up in this situation? That is
Mhm.
a form of emotional work or emotional labor, and leaders need to do a lot of that in order to be successful.
And how should I show up
Hmm.
in this situation? That
Yeah.
seems to me like that's the definition of emotional savvy, to have a good answer to that question
Hmm.
and a
Yeah. I
confident
mean, I
answer.
can't. I've had so many coaching conversations with leaders who are going into either high stakes or emotionally loaded situations with their team. And they're like, how authentic should I be? Like, it is this calculus um, that leaders are doing. And that's taxing, right? There's a
Mhm.
cognitive load to really thinking about how exactly should I show up? What's the right amount?
Mhm.
And it's just under acknowledged.
Mhm. We'll have a whole discussion about emotional labor. I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, undervalued, but, a real thing.
Hmm.
Our world is pretty polarized at the moment. I don't know why this question occurred to me, but anyway, um, how is polarization affecting the emotion, the emotional expression that HR and leaders need to bring into the workplace?
There's a couple things there. One, I feel as though this polarization, right? Like, um, it makes approaching those topics feel even riskier,
Okay, yeah, that's
right?
right.
And when we're worried about how someone might react, or if a meeting could spiral out of control if we go there, or there might be some unintended negative consequences, oftentimes what people will do is they'll avoid it.
Yeah.
And but again, this polarization, right? It is emotionally laden, and these emotions
Mhm.
aren't going away. They're still there.
Yeah.
And and so some of the advice that I offer to the leaders that I work with is about how to prepare for conversations that that they feel like might be more emotionally charged. And there are strategies that you can employ ahead of time in order to make those interactions go more smoothly. So, for example, ahead of time, thinking strategically through, the what, the when, the where, the who, the why of the meeting, and making very conscious choices about how to modify the situation in order to bring down the emotional temperature.
Mm,
Mentally rehearsing the meeting, like thinking about what are the moments where things could go sideways and how will I handle those?
mhm,
Visualization is such a powerful way to improve performance in the moment. And then, of course, I really have so much empathy for leaders. They're back to back in meetings, but especially before you go into a high stakes meeting, having a buffer both before and after for sure that proper preparation and reset afterwards so you don't carry all the stress and tension into your next interaction is critical. And then there's
mhm.
just a whole nother set of strategies, of course, when you're caught off guard by a conversation that you thought was going to be relatively benign and then gets very emotional. So,
Okay, that happens in HR a lot where we get caught off
mhm,
an employee who charges into our office or a supervisor and they're, you know, raging.
yeah.
What are those strategies for dealing with that kind of situation?
Thankfully, I feel as though HR is the most well equipped to handle those
Oh,
situations, but it doesn't come without an emotional load for HR
right.
people.
Yeah.
Um, right? When you have someone who has come into your office and for whatever reason, they're feeling very heightened negative emotions, whether it's anger, frustration, or sadness, or um, disappoint. I mean, you name it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think it starts with acknowledging the emotion in the situation, but not
Right.
making assumptions about what the person is feeling.
Okay, so what does
It
that
can,
look like?
it's an
Sorry.
observation. You know, I can tell, this isn't feeling great for you. How are you feeling about it? Like, if you were to choose 1 or 2
Oh,
words.
yeah. I just ask outright, like ask for their words. Yes.
Yeah, just a general observation, um, and that helps the person notice their feelings and
Mhm.
then really name them. And when we search our minds for what is the word that describes how I feel,
Mhm.
helps us regulate our emotions. In the
Mm.
brain, there's actually this sort of seesaw of activity. We need to engage our prefrontal cortex to recall descriptive words. Well, when we do that, some of the activity shifts out of the amygdala. So asking people, as opposed to assuming like, oh, wow, you look really mad, put the work on them. One, because you don't want to step on it and guess the wrong emotion. And two, because it'll actually help them ground. And so, that would be the first line of defense, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
To help the person just take a breath and feel seen and acknowledged.
Mhm.
Of course, and nonviolent communication methods
Mm.
are the ones you want to lean on in situations where people are inflamed for
Mhm.
whatever reason. Um, and so, those are just some
Yeah.
of some of the
Yeah.
basics.
Yeah.
And then asking God, like, what happened?
Yep.
What are you making of it? Why is it so upset?
Yeah.
And
I
helping
love
people
that
work
question.
through it.
I love that question. What are you making of it?
Hmm.
Like, I never think to ask that question, but it is such a good question.
Well, so
Um,
often we make big assumptions
yes.
about other people's intentions or about a situation, and we have a very narrow and limited view.
Mhm.
But it is our truth, right?
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
feels like our entire reality.
Mhm.
Um, and but oftentimes we're telling ourselves a story about a situation without complete information. And so starting to unpack some of those assumptions or aggravated fears can also help us see like, oh, right. Maybe there
Mhm.
maybe there's more to it here. And help people
Mhm.
kind of get back into problem solving constructively.
Yeah. What are, like, if you could break it, do you break it down? I guess is one question. And if you could break it down into separate skills, what are the skills that HR should be focusing on to develop their emotional savvy?
Um, I honestly, I feel like I'm harping on it, but um,
Go ahead.
HR, HR especially, they to 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 promote greater emotional savvy within organizations, they need to be speaking from a place of strong credibility. And
Mm,
that is where I feel as though the science, just this very accurate understanding of what emotions are and their value in organizations is
mhm,
critical to have that credibility with um, other business leaders who maybe are more skeptical about the place of emotions or how to even approach them on their
mm,
teams. I oftentimes find like the science is my greatest bridge when
mm.
it comes to skeptics because what they're looking for is what feels like more objective data.
Yes.
And when we lean on the science, we've got the objective data. And so I would start there. And then some of the simple frameworks that can help people build these more elemental skills can be helpful. There's one I offer in an HBR article, and it's the 4 N's, and it starts with noticing the emotions, naming them, again, because that's a regulation strategy. Need, emotions are messengers of needs. What's the
Mm,
need here? When we acknowledge our emotional need or those are the needs of others, we unlock energy and positive feeling and motivation and action, right? Which is what
mhm,
all leaders want in their teams. And
mhm,
then finally normalize. Leaders
mm,
have to set the tone for their teams. Otherwise, it's going to feel very, very unsafe for other people to be expressing any emotions on the team. So, noticed, name, need, normalize is a great one to get people started.
Um, you referred to the science of emotions.
Mhm.
We didn't really talk about that much here today. Uh, can you briefly describe what you mean? What is the science of emotions?
Yes. It there's 4 chapters
Okay.
dedicated to it in the book.
Okay.
Um, but I'll just start with one tidbit, which is people talk about feelings and emotions as though they're the same thing, that they're interchangeable. But
Mhm.
that's actually not the case. Emotions are complex patterns that involve our behavior, a physiological response, and a cognitive element,
Mm,
our mental interpretation
mhm,
of our inner experience and the context. And it's really this mental interpretation that is most akin to the word feeling when we use that in parlance. And so understanding that emotion is far more than just our feelings is an important place to start, right? Because, for example, when people are suppressing or faking emotions, they're just managing what's on the surface. But there's all of this physiology and cognitive element that sits below. And that is why when we just ignore feelings in the workplace, we're ignoring all this other information that's still there. Um,
mhm.
and is why, you have emotions really deriving behavior unconsciously and reactively when we don't acknowledge them.
Okay. All right. We're getting to the end of this. Where can someone learn more about you and more about the topic?
Thank you. My website is a great place to find me. It's dinadsmith.com. And then I'm active on LinkedIn, not on any
Mhm.
of the other social media platforms. I just can't take the overwhelm. But my website or LinkedIn are great places to find me and connect with me. Um, HBR, of course, some other magazines, as well as our book, Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work.
Okay. All right. I will put links to those all in the show notes. Well, thanks, Dina. That was great. I am thinking about a couple things. One is the that you shared at the very end is acknowledging the emotions under the surface, and if you don't, they are going to be driving behavior anyhow. And the other one was that framework of notice, name, need, and normalize. I think that is a great framework, and I got to put that one into action. I did an episode on organizational restructuring and layoffs. I can hardly think of a more emotionally charged aspect of HR. Look for a link for that in either on the side of the screen or in my in a past episode. Thanks for watching out there. We will see you next time.